Practical work. When talking about inner states, it is pointless to begin with vague generalizations. For example, to talk of chaotic states, because to talk in this way is to talk chaotically. One of the objectives of self-observation is actually to observe something, not chaos. To take the work phrase, man cannot do, in such a way that one makes no effort is a good example of chaotic thinking in this work. There is one thing we are told we can do with regard to our inner self, and that is we can all observe ourselves. We can observe the working of different centers and observe different eyes in us. We can observe when we are internally considering. We can observe when we are negative. We can observe when we are identifying. We can observe where we are justifying ourselves and so on. The work is to pull a person together, to brace them and to make them have a more distinct relationship to all that goes on inside of them. For this reason, we are taught first of all to observe ourselves, and then to observe the self from certain well-defined angles. An individual must get hold of themselves, they must steady themselves, they must try to let light within in order to see what is going on inside, and so where they are going in themselves. They need to observe where they are talking wrongly, where they are complaining and not working, where they are saying things mechanically that should belong to self-observation. The work must become practice. In every wrong state, it is absolutely necessary to review oneself from what the work teaches, and try to see where we are. If we never call upon the work to help us, then it will not be able to help. Our relationship to the work is an internal matter that lies between us and this work right down, deep inside of each person. One can talk as much as they like about their difficulties with the work. They can let the whole of the work discharge itself into small eyes. They can connect the work with some feature in themselves, then turn it into a source of perplexity and worry. Someone can treat the work in 1,000 different ways, but it is important how one treats the work, because it can produce great tensions within us. Its objective is to do so, but it is necessary to keep the work, as it were, inviolate, as something utterly pure that cannot be contradicted, and which at the same time is telling us something if we will only listen to what it is saying, if we will only relate ourselves to what it is teaching. It is easy to say that one does not understand the work, however there is a right way of saying this and a wrong way. It is obviously useless to shrug one's shoulders mentally speaking, and again it is quite useless to think that one should understand the work after a few years' casual practicing of it. A great deal of patience is necessary, and patience is the mother of will. We find ourselves in a crowd of people within, with some of them saying one thing and some saying another. If there is valuation, and if in spite of all difficulties we can feel that here is something that can eventually lead us away from our present states, then if in spite of all the failures this valuation persists, then a center of gravity will be formed, a point in the work will be established, and when this is so, it is a very blessed condition. Do not complain too easily, because as is known, it takes a long time to learn anything in a real way, even in life. Remember how often it is said that if you wish to learn Chinese thoroughly, it will take all of your life. So do not have too short a view. Do not think that when you begin to observe yourself and find a chaos within you, that there's need for pessimism. It is actually the first step in this work, the first step to realization. What then, a person may ask, should I do? The answer is that we must begin to follow as sincerely as we can all the practical things that the work tells us to observe and separate from. The intelligent scrutiny of oneself, the practice of a directed noticing of oneself, the application of non-identifying with certain states of oneself, remembering that certain eyes weaken us and undermine everything that we do, all this is being led by the work. All this is following the work. People do not surrender to the work for a long time. They keep on trying to do things by themselves according to their own inclination, instead of doing things according to the work. They continue to make the same life efforts as before, but do not make work effort. However, all this is necessary to pass through, and one must pass through this jungle, through this tangled forest, this kind of darkness, until we discern the work and what it is saying. For a long time the last thing that we ever think of doing is to work on ourselves in accordance with what the work teaches. We wriggle about, as it were, like a fish on the end of a line, and will not submit to the gentle tug of the line which will lift us into another atmosphere. We get into a bad state and we identify with it right away. Then we see everything through the medium of this bad state, but do not think of practicing non-identifying with the bad state, of seeing that it is not I. On the contrary, we say I to it, and we argue about everything from this bad state which is quite incapable of leading us anywhere, save into a worse state. We are like people standing in the drenching rain complaining that they are catching cold and saying how miserable they feel, when their own house is standing close beside them into which they can go. Often when standing in the drenching rain, and this bad inner state, we think vaguely of trying to work on ourselves and of separating from it internally, through an act of consciousness and will, but some small eye pipes up and says, "Oh, the work is too difficult for me. In connection with the idea of rendering things more distinct within ourselves, there is a short commentary on 3 different sorts of relationship that can occupy our attention. It is necessary to try to establish a distinct awareness of where one is. Where we are in physical space is not relevant, however, where one is in the world of relationship, which is the real world in which we live. Everything lies in relationship, in how we relate ourselves to things. We cannot change the thing itself, but we can change our relationship to it. All this work is about changing our relationship, both to ourselves and to life. To say that we can do nothing is to take the idea of the work quite incorrectly. We cannot change life. We cannot do in this sense, but we can change ourselves and our relationship to everything. This is what the work emphasizes time and again. We can change ourselves through the medium of C influences provided we recognize them, provided we acknowledge the existence of greater mind. However, we cannot change life in general, nor can we change other people. We cannot make a new world, and if we think we can, then we are what are called lunatics in this work. Remember that the whole question lies in changing our relationship to things, in taking things in a new way, and so in thinking in a new way about everything. In this regard, remember that duckboards and stilts are things that change our relationship to this mud that is both life itself outside, and our ordinary state of sleep inside. To change the metaphor, the work teaches that we are in prison, and not at all a pleasant prison at that. Some inhabit better cells and some worse. Some even enjoy the prison. But there is a way to escape, and the secret has been handed on from generation to generation. It is a curious secret, just as the prison is a curious one, for the prison is not composed of literal stone walls, ramparts and guards, or literal chains and dungeons. The fact of its existence is due to our looking the wrong way around, in the wrong direction. The myth of the cave in Plato's Republic illustrates this. Reflect upon what it means, as it will help to realize how ancient and how authoritative this teaching is.